Hello, welcome again to another video on understanding insurance claims. Today we're going to be looking at automobile contributory negligence. What does contributory negligence mean? Every state has some sort of negligence guideline that they use. In some states it's what we call comparative negligence. In some states it's contributory negligence. So this is how the law looks at situations that occur as to who might be at fault and who would be charged as to being negligent. In some states, and today we're going to look at contributory negligence, we're finding that those states are fewer. I think there's only 5 or 6 states left that still use contributory negligence. Most of them use some type of comparative negligence. But for those states that still use contributory negligence, this is basically how it works. Say, for instance, you're a pedestrian and you're crossing the street hurriedly and you forget to look at the light. Maybe you're crossing the street at a time when you shouldn't be crossing the street. You're crossing against the traffic, and maybe you're not in the designated crosswalk area, but you're somewhere else where basically you're jaywalking. But say you're struck by an automobile that is speeding. Well, and you're hit. So who's at fault? Well, typically the person driving the car would say, well, if you hadn't been jaywalking, I wouldn't have hit you. So my speed did not cause the accident, but the fact that you jaywalked. Well, the person injured could say, well, if you hadn't been speeding, I would have time to get out of the way. Okay, in that particular case with contributory negligence, neither one of you would be able to recover. He wouldn't be recovered for any damage to his automobile. You wouldn't be recovered for any injuries to yourself. But say the injured party says, well, I'm going to file a lawsuit, and they file a lawsuit and the matter goes to court. Well, a sympathetic jury may give the injured person a recovery, but it's not because they're required to under the law, but it's because of their sympathy toward this injured individual. And sometimes they may feel that the insurance company they can pay it. And, most insurance companies are considered to have deep pockets, and they can pay any type of judgment without a problem. However, that's not always the case. Most insurance companies operate very close as far as profit margin is concerned. But that's an example of contributory negligence. Let me give you another example. Say you're driving a vehicle and you're going down a 2-lane road and you decide to pass. Maybe there's someone in front of you who's driving very slow and you decide, well, I'm going to pass. But you're passing in a no passing zone. Well, what if another car suddenly comes over the hill? All right, who's in the two cars collide? Whose fault is it? Well, say for instance the car that comes over the hill, if they can safely move out of the way, maybe move over to a wide shoulder of the road and avoid the accident, then they have a responsibility and obligation to do so. That's called the last clear chance doctrine. In other words, they had an opportunity to avoid the accident and you didn't have an opportunity. So they could be held to be negligent. Now your negligence was also there, but so was theirs, because they could have avoided the accident and you couldn't. So it may be that the courts would decide, or jury would decide, that the person who could have moved over to the shoulder and avoided the accident is more or is negligent, and the person who was passing on a yellow line wasn't. But that's an example of contributory negligence. Ordinarily, if you are at any degree at fault in an accident, then you would not be able to collect from the other party because your negligence contributed to the accident. And as I said, most states have done away with that simply because they find in every accident there are degrees of negligence. One person may be more negligent and his actions may have contributed to the accident to a greater degree than someone else. So most states are moving away from contributory negligence, but there are still a few that use that doctrine. So one thing I want to clear up, a lot of people over the years that I was handling automobile insurance claims, a lot of people told me, well, so-and-so is at fault because they did not have a driver's license. Their license tags had expired or whatever. Well, that's not a matter. That has no bearing on the case. It only comes back to who was responsible. Whether you had a valid driver's license or not does not in any way determine who was responsible for the accident, because the person who was driving without insurance, was driving with on an expired license or revoked license or whatever, they may have done everything exactly as they should have. Well, if the accident occurred and the person who was negligent, maybe they had the insurance, they had a valid driver's license and so forth, but if their actions caused the accident, then they would be the one responsible. So the fact that a person doesn't meet the requirements of the state law as far as their driver's license and insurance is a matter for another court to determine. What we're talking about here are cases that would go to civil court. Civil court is when there is a tort, when there is a wrong created by one person against another person, either because of something they did or something they failed to do. So the fact that you have license or don't have license will not be a factor in determining who was at fault. But it comes down to this. If you're driving in a state where they still use contributory negligence, if your actions at any point create or help to create the accident, then theoretically you won't be able to recover. So again, I hope that this has been of some benefit to you, and that if you're in one of those states and you have an accident, it's something that will pertain and will come into play in your particular case. But if you like the video, I ask you to hit the subscribe button and be looking for more videos. And I will be doing video on the states that don't use contributory negligence but use something else. So you can be looking for that one as well. And again, I thank you and I hope you have a wonderful day.